I think this is relevant to a lot of the other free flow portfolio companies in particular because of the thesis around Caltech IP and invention and inventors. And so for me, I want to like show you a little bit about my journey from basically wrapping up my PhD at Caltech and inventing this new version of the Grubbs catalyst, which maybe most people know on this call Bob won the Nobel Prize for in 2005. And then kind of quickly fast forward through a bunch of iterations and permutations on this idea to how we got thinking about commercializing this. What I set out to do was to create a photoresist based on the Grubbs catalyst system, and I ended up succeeding in doing that. And I won't go into the chemical details, but while I did set out to do what I intended, the way that I arrived there was very much a discovery, and what I drew on paper was not actually what was happening. And I ended up discovering that this version of the Grubbs catalyst that for the entire history of Bob's group before me, people had been throwing away, could actually be reactivated by light. And so this is kind of where this like recycling the catalyst waste with light comes from. And we were thinking a lot about sustainability, cradle to cradle chemistry. Could you sort of do these loops where you would like recover the catalyst and make new things with it? And then of course, anytime you have a patterning mechanism, you have to make your school logo. So this was like the best Caltech logo I had, spinning these thin films of this material onto a silicon wafer. And you can see a little bit about like where my head was at, very much in the like, cradle to cradle green chemistry ideas, and then also kind of applying these things to nanophotonics, metamaterials. Again, the work that I had been doing in the Atwater group was a lot of it around photonic crystals. And so, I thought this would just be like a fun way to sort of show you like all of the different directions that we were thinking about when I was leaving Caltech. And again, this idea of like, okay, this system of would take the functional group tolerance of the Grubbs catalyst system, which is really a big part of why Bob won the Nobel Prize, and now apply this to patterning. And so we were going to do artificial photosynthesis and metamaterials, cradle materials, micro MEMS devices, 3D nano fabrication, all of this stuff with one thing. So anyways, that was just kind of a little bit about where my head was at. And I would say that in that kind of, let's say, halfway home of the Cyclotron Road program and Activate program, I have a few more fun videos. It was a really cool opportunity to get to go first and be part of the founding cohort there, and led to a number of really interesting opportunities. So I got to battle the Secretary of Energy at the time, Rick Perry, in a 3D printed wishbone breaking contest, which was a lot of fun, and even got invited to basically present to Bill Gates on the sustainability aspects of 3D printing. And this actually made it into the Inside Bill's Brain documentary on Netflix, which was pretty cool. So obviously they cut 20 minutes down to, I don't know, 10 seconds, but it was a really cool opportunity and a great stepping stone for me to go from really like thinking like a scientist, getting this amazing scientific training, and then starting to learn how to tell the story, build a business, think about business models, all this stuff. And then again, I just thought it'd be fun to show a little bit about where we were thinking coming out of that in the very first financing. So again, now we're really had decided that of all of those different applications, we spent a lot of time thinking about them and doing some customer discovery in them. And we really realized that 3D printing was the best opportunity for us. And it was this space where and in many ways, this hasn't changed in the last 7 years, which is kind of wild. But it was a space where, the hardware was completely democratized and like commoditized and ubiquitous. The software was getting faster and easier and in the cloud. And like at this point, I'm sure it wouldn't surprise anybody that, your kids are doing 3D printing at school and all this stuff. It's really like not high tech as an idea anymore. And yet the materials were all so bad for printing that you're still in this game of prototyping. And the whole thesis of the company was, well, the thing that's keeping 3D printing from being true additive manufacturing is really a material science problem. There are some better materials than there were when we first founded the company, but by and large, no one has beat us to the problem that we set out to solve. And this is really the considered by many to be this holy grail problem of what people might call now resin 3D printing or photopolymer printing, stereolithography. There's a number of different words for this. And so we're still in this sort of top right corner on this plot, and it still is the gating factor for going into manufacturing. And it's been very well received by the industry, and we basically now have partnerships with all of the top printer companies. And so I put just one brief quote here from the managing director of Asiga, who basically, in his opinion, this is like one of the most significant developments in the history of the industry. So it's very we picked a really hard problem to solve, and it took us a really long time to make it a drop-in, but no one beat us to the opportunity, even though it's been quite a while since I left Caltech. And again, this is sort of trying to simplify a slightly different way of saying it, what I said earlier. The hardware is there, the software is there, the materials aren't. And this is just a recent quote from senior vice president at Stratasys. That's this guy's like in charge of strategy, and basically they have all the printers they need, but if you don't have materials, there's no future, right? And so Stratasys being the biggest 3D printing company in the world, it's kind of fun interacting with them now as a partner, where we basically like founded our company to solve this problem that they've been aware of for decades. We're thinking about, lattices and what you might call like a topology optimization structure for aerospace. So whether it's more of a regular lattice or algorithmically designed lightweight to strength calculation. Those are all important applications in transportation, including auto and aero. Today we have kind of two variations. We have the core black and the core alpha. And again, almost all of the applications that we're working on are things where you really need high performance in a critical environment. So getting closer to under the hood in automotive, you can imagine like a bioreactor that's got to be hot and keep this thing spinning. We have a bunch of work that we're doing in medical devices, including dental, electronics components, starting to think about some consumer products, and obviously like the defense industry is an important early adopter of advanced materials. I've been very passionate about sustainability since even before I came to Caltech, and I again, like the folks that have been funding us both through the Activate program, as well as our earliest investors like Prelude and Congruent. A big part of the folks that have backed us over the years have been really focused on clean tech, climate tech, whatever you want to call it, sustainability. And one of the things that I've been working on over the last 10 years really is trying to help people understand the connection between 3D printing and sustainability. And it's not particularly easy it's not obvious. And I think part of the reason it's not obvious is that most people don't know how things are made. But the components in my iPhone flew halfway around the world about 6 times before the device is fully assembled. And then it goes to the store, right? And, you know, and then you buy it, and there's all those kind of last mile logistics. But just to put it in context, about 30% of global energy is used to just move stuff around the planet. And I'd be happy to share the like reference for this if people are, you know, want to dig into the details. But it's actually predicted that you could reduce global energy usage by 25% by the year 2050 in a world where you are doing distributed digital manufacturing. So you are sending files over the internet instead of parts all over the planet, and you are you know, 3D printing or additively manufacturing the end use component as close to the point of use as possible. And obviously the big delta for that kind of double digit energy savings requires like complete reconfiguration of the global supply chain. But just to put in perspective, you could save about 10% of global energy if you just made things on the same continent as where they're used or purchased, right? So it's actually a really massive opportunity. I think it's an underappreciated one. Obviously, you know, batteries are hot, you know, solar's cool. I think people are thinking about nuclear, but I think there's this incredibly underappreciated opportunity in the embodied energy of our built environment that can be addressed with digital manufacturing.
One question I wanted to ask you just out of the gates is, you know, you had this academic path that you were on, right? Like getting your PhD, etc. Did you know when you were pursuing that you wanted to eventually do something like this, or was that, you know, something that you when did you, either way, like when did you make that decision? Like in
Yeah.
when yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say is and this is something that you know, has been kind of my advertisement for the Activate Fellowship. But what I would say is I think that the absolute most important thing for me about that 2 years of the fellowship was giving me that kind of time to really decide like for sure like I'm going to build a company around this. And so I'd say, yeah, as I was like wrapping up grad school, you know, obviously Caltech is an incredibly competitive place, and like, you know, I had very much been thinking like I'm gonna be a professor, and been kind of like groomed for that in many ways. And I guess what I'd say is on a more like personal or like existential level, I think that the thing that I realized was the thing I valued the most about academia was this idea of like intellectual freedom, right? Like, okay, once you get tenured, you kind of get to like think about whatever you want. And I really realized that like, well, one, that's really only true to the extent that like you can, you know, get grants to fund it, right? Like, so there's always like a cat, maybe in math, like you're truly free, right? Like your budget is like some pencils, and you, you know, really can think about whatever you want. Um, but then so I realized like, well, okay, maybe that's not really true. And then I also realized that, you know, actually like instead of setting myself up to like be able to invent as many cool things as I could possibly think of, like actually this one thing that I invented could like help so many other people, and like could be the foundation that other inventors are using to like build their ideas.